with sustainability, we look at humankind's impact on the natural environment. And in resiliency, we look at the environment, the natural environment's impact on the built world.
Welcome to the Architect My Life podcast. I'm Shlachter, your host, CEO of MGS Global Group, supporting architecture and design firms. We provide BIM modeling and drafting services to overwhelmed architects and design firm owners. On my podcast, I talk to successful women firm owners and entrepreneurs to discuss their challenges, share our experiences, and above all, celebrate each other's success. My core business, MGS Global, started as a part-time gig when I was a new mom. It has now grown to a thriving business, providing architectural support to the creatives, which helps everyone maintain a healthy work-life balance. The Architect My Life podcast is where I hope you learn to achieve your goals through genuine stories and conversations with other successful women in the industry. Now let's dive into this episode. Hi everyone, our guest this week is Dena Prastos. As founder and CEO of Indigo River, Dena is the first waterfront architect trailblazing a new category in the industry. Indigo River is a woman-owned transdisciplinary design firm focused on progressive waterfront architecture, resiliency, and climate adaptation. A leading authority in New York Harbor and beyond, the firm specializes in climate adaptation through waterfront solutions that seamlessly transcend boundaries, guiding and executing projects from ideation through final construction and operations. Waterfront architect, civil engineer, futurist, climate adaptation expert, entrepreneur, and creative original, Dena is driven to transform the built world at the water's edge. I'm so thrilled to talk to her today. Welcome to the show, Dena.
Hi, Aya. Thank you for having me. My pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited because you have done so much in your last, I don't know how many years, because you look pretty young. So tell me about your childhood in Alaska and what was your childhood like growing up?
Incredibly active. I have two brothers, and all of us, I feel like my poor mother was split her time between carting us all to athletics or music or academics. So we all played a musical instrument. We all played at least one sport every season. And then academics were kind of first and foremost, that we weren't allowed to go to our practices unless our homework was done. But Alaska was really a great place to grow up. Certainly immersed in the outdoors. Our summers were usually, other than sports, we would spend a lot of time camping and hiking and fishing and just doing things out in nature. And the summers there are stunning and beautiful, and the sun doesn't set until, if at all, 11 midnight. So you get a lot of daylight.
Is that all year round?
In the summers. The winters alternatively are dark and cold, but you can tell I'm a summer baby and I love the summer.
That's great. So are you originally from Alaska? Are you Greek?
I am Greek, 100% Greek. My mother immigrated over with my father. My father's also Greek, but second generation. My dad was born and raised in New York. My mom was born and raised in Sparta, Greece.
Oh, wow.
And they ended up in Alaska, and it was supposed to be, a 1 or 2 year thing, and ended up being 40 plus years and 3 kids later, and they're still up there, although they travel more now.
I was always curious about Alaska because every time I go home to the Philippines, we always had a layover in Alaska.
Yep.
But I've never met anyone from Alaska, and you're the first.
Well, I was born and raised there, and it was a great place to grow up. The high school I went to is the most diverse high school in the country, so that's also pretty special.
In Alaska, the most diverse high school in the country. That's
Yes.
interesting.
Yep.
So I don't know if you know this, but I'm Filipino. And this month is Filipino Heritage Month. So do you know other Filipinos?
Yes, one of my very best friends growing up was Filipina, and we played soccer together. We went to college together. One of my very, very dear close friends still. So
That's awesome.
we would take our soccer breaks and go to her house and have pancit and enjoy our bibingka. And
I can't believe you just said that. I did a podcast episode with 3 Filipinas, and we did top 6 things about being Filipino. What's your favorite food? Pancit. What's your favorite dessert? Bibingka.
Yep.
Exactly what you said. So you could be Filipino.
By adoption, yes. We grew up
Yeah.
in each other's homes. So she also knew the Greek baklava and the pastitsa or whatever my mom would make. We would, exchange leftovers and enjoy each other's family meals.
Oh my God. I actually was in Greece for the first time over the summer.
Oh, how
just to
fantastic.
yeah, just for 4 days. But I loved Greece so much.
Well, the Philippines also are beautiful. I've been to a couple places and really enjoyed it. Stunning, gorgeous beaches.
You have been to the Philippines?
I have.
Oh, wow. Where?
So what is, oh, I'm blanking on the name of the island. It'll come to me.
Boracay or
Boracay.
Palawan? Yeah.
Boracay.
Yeah,
Gorgeous.
everybody goes to Boracay. So, so tell me, what was your most memorable experience that involved nature? Because you're obviously later. We'll talk later on about being a waterfront architect. But what when you were a child, how did what was your relationship towards nature?
So we had a stream in my backyard that, I mean, any time of year we'd go outside, even in the dead of winter, and we'd go and see the water flowing, and some parts would be frozen over, but always just with endless curiosity exploring the stream bed. And that was on a, regular basis throughout my childhood until I left for college. But in particular, I can remember, I mean, a handful of camping trips and things. One, the summer I turned 14, I went with my dad and we went down the Yukon River, just camping on the riverbed for 2 weeks. And it was around summer solstice. So it was eerie in that it didn't have a traditional sunrise and sunset. The sun just kind of circled the horizon and it was hard to keep track of time. And I think I've got the darkest I've ever been in my life tan wise, just because that, sun didn't set. It wasn't super strong, but it was constant. So certainly remember exploring riverbeds and stream beds throughout my childhood. And anytime we would travel, whether to Greece to see family or not, we'd go to, coastlines and shorelines, and just remember much of our time was spent on the water, near the water.
Well, first of all, I commend you for being in the woods for 2 weeks. I did camping and 2 days was enough. So, who was the person or situation or event that inspired you to pursue architecture at first? Because you moved to the U.S. I mean, you moved to NJIT right from Alaska.
No, I actually had a little bit of an indirect path. So I went to University of Connecticut for my first year out of school. I played soccer, Division 1 soccer, and I was recruited, and the team was phenomenal. And I hadn't put the emphasis on my career or academia at that time. It was all about, athletics and Division 1 sports. And so I went to University of Connecticut, but I did have in the back of my mind from a young age an appreciation for architecture. My mom certainly had an appreciation for architecture, also kind of balancing the arts and the sciences. And so when I was midway through my first year at UConn, undergraduate and just kind of generic business degree, I found that I was, for the first time, really struggling to stay focused on my academics. And it wasn't that, there was anything wrong. It was just that I couldn't connect to the content. I couldn't connect to what it was setting me up for, and I wasn't excited about it. And so second semester, against all of my advisors' advice, I pivoted and took any and every course that was even, peripheral related to architecture. So I took art history and drawing classes and landscape architecture classes, just general degree credits that I could transfer if I decided that resonated, and it certainly did. And so then my search was filtered down to Division 1 athletics programs where I could still play soccer and maybe receive scholarship, and a 5-year architecture program where I could finish my undergraduate degree and be in a position to be licensed. And so that was a very short list. There are surprisingly many schools and many coaches that don't allow for architecture to be the major for Division 1 athletes. And maybe that's by nature of, studio environment, of all-nighters, which I have to say I never actually ended up pulling an all-nighter. But there is a huge time component for an athletic, for a architecture student.
Were you a student athlete in NJIT?
I was, and I
Was it
was.
Division 1 or 3?
It was Division 1. So the year I came was actually the year that they were transitioning from Division 2 to Division 1. And I ended up being a 3-year captain, and I even stayed on a year later and was a student coach for the program.
Wow. I actually was also in the swim team, but we were Division 3.
So
And
I believe all of the athletics have transitioned now. I was actually back on campus a week or two ago, and I received a full tour of the athletics facility, and it is beautiful, out of this world, and state of the art. They have one of those underwater treadmills. It's amazing, phenomenal facilities, which were not the case. I mean, they were great when I was there, but now they're at a whole new level. So it's really wonderful to see that.
may I ask what year you were there?
I finished. So I went in 2005, and I finished in 2009 with two programs. So I did my undergraduate in architecture, and I pretty much every summer took classes nonstop. And then I also took a master's in civil engineering. So I finished in 2009.
Oh my, that sounds scary. A lot of work. I was there in '99, so I'm way ahead. But that time I was already impressed by all of their the gymnasium and all
The
that. But I
facilities,
hear,
go
yeah,
back
but I
now. It'll blow your mind.
okay, I have to maybe attend one of those. They always send me postcards for alumni.
Yep,
So now that I know you and a few other amazing women, I might just go. Um,
absolutely.
yeah, and I really valued my education in NJIT. I learned so much from my 4 years in NJIT. So tell me, what does a waterfront architect do?
So if you think of it as a kind of a typology or a condition where anytime the water meets something man-made, that's what I'll focus on. So that can come in many different forms. It can be a building that's on the water, but generally that interface isn't the building on the water. There'll be a bulkhead or a platform or a wharf. It can also be a marina or a port facility. I've done many ferry landings. So it really depends on what that infrastructure is. And it often ends up being infrastructure, not typically am I working on a building per se or a traditional building the way that most architects would, but I'm really looking at that condition where nature meets the man-made by form of water and whatever the upland condition is.
So why waterfront architecture as a specialization? Like I hear people go into tech or like hospitality, but never waterfront architecture. So I'm really excited how you got there.
So I didn't set out looking to be a waterfront architect by any means. One of the first projects I was actually assigned, I was put on, was the Staten Island Ferry Terminal. And at the time, I worked for a contractor, and it was a design build project. And so I worked on the contractor side, but really as in the position of a design liaison. So I would be the intermediary, carrying the comments back and forth, and kind of advocating for whoever wasn't in the room, whether it was the designers or the contracting and constructing engineers. And there was a lot of certainly it's a very heavily regulated environment, and so there are scenarios that wouldn't typically be encountered, but as soon as you start to get a grasp of them and are able to apply them to other sites that are similar, I feel like that in and of itself is appreciated as a specialty. So I do believe New York City waterfront, or New York, the harbor in New York, is probably one of, if not the most heavily regulated areas in the country, certainly, but perhaps even in the world, because there are so many layers of regulatory review and environmental review that one must go through to develop on the water. And it's not just at a local, city level or at a state level, it's also at a federal level as well. And there are just many different agencies with different motivations. So it's a lot to kind of grasp and get your arms around. And then once you start to understand the different motivations, that's where I think the fun starts, is to be able to design in that kind of gray space and anticipate what the motivations will be and respond to them proactively.
So do you do a lot of policy writing and changing or, or design itself, or is it half and half?
So it's funny that you asked that. I don't do a lot of policy writing per se, but I do participate actively in a few different committees that review and respond and give advice back when policy is in, draft form for different areas within regulation. But it's just something, I don't know how your education finished, but when my education finished, I didn't understand the role of the architect to be nearly as political as it is or as it can be. And so certainly even over the weekend, I was reading some policy, and my mom asked what I was reading, and I told her, and she said, "Is that for fun or what?" I said, "Well, I'm curious. It relates to my work. It's, I don't know whether fun is the right word, but relative and then relevant, certainly."
Wow, that's exciting. So you talk about biomimicry, ecology, and futurism in relation to waterfront architecture. Can you, first of all, can you explain what biomimicry is and the rest as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So, biomimicry, it's when we look to nature and mimic nature's, whether it's processes or forms. And we do it a lot, whether subconsciously or not, but it's really, in my mind, appreciating nature and learning from it. So that can be on the level of certainly what something looks like, its form, but often there's some process embedded in the form of why it looks the way it looks, and it's getting to the root of that. And so that's, taking those cues from nature and applying them to our design principles.
Do you have a specific project you can share or that does this or example so we can visualize it?
So I'll give you some example on the ecology front, which is also
Okay.
related to natural processes. But ecology is looking at the different species and how they have interdependencies and their intricacies that are intertwined. And so certainly understanding ecologies on the waterfront. I mean, there's ecology is embedded everywhere, but that we are our environment is not just for people; it's for the planet and all of the animals on the planet. And so certainly when we work on the waterfront, when we consider, impact on species and fish species, we're not looking, within the limits only of what's on the site. When we're on the site, we have to consider all of the migrations, all of the seasonal patterns, the habitats, and when they spawn and what the conditions need to be. And what we do on one site, while it's, capped by the bounds of the meets and bounds of the property site, there are many other species that come in and out. And it happens with birds and migratory patterns as well. It happens with highways when we build, and you can't let the migration patterns be interrupted. There are certain considerations, but certainly on the waterfront, I feel like it is front and center because of we're building in someone else's habitat. And oftentimes, whether or not we're encroaching into a river or water body, there are impacts even just during the construction that affect the habitat of that area. So when we look at ecology, we can think of, what is our role within this planet and what is our built environment doing to affect the other habitats, the other species. Are we driving them out? Are we causing, patterns that they'll become extinct? And so other projects that we have, we work currently on the River Ring project for Two Trees, which there is an ecologist that is a member of our team, but that philosophy kind of gets embedded into every part of the design because we can't go too far without considering and reconsidering the impacts to the other species. And in this case, it's a project where it's really looking to celebrate the different ecology and create habitat environments for different species to thrive.
So you collaborate a lot with ecologists. Who else do you collaborate with, in a typical project?
Many different disciplines. So even I'll start with even who the different members of our team are, and then certainly who we collaborate with. I mean, I have a more traditional background in architecture. I also have a background in civil engineering. We have another kind of more typically trained architect and master's in urban planning. And then beyond that, we're the only two real architects in the traditional sense. We do have a landscape architect, we do have city planners, we do have climate adaptation specialists, and then on our engineering side, we have marine engineers, coastal engineers, construction engineers, and we do a lot of the ancillary project management and project controls like cost estimating, scheduling, sequencing, logistics, because that's another thing on the waterfront is the constructability and the means and methods are kind of embedded in the design process because whatever you design, you have to think about how it will be built. And that's something that, for traditional sites upland, there's an assumed route that materials will take by road and by truck, and by the water, that's not always the case. Or you have a kind of added flexibility of bringing materials to site by water, which also affects the size and scale of components as we design them, that they can come by barge and they don't necessarily need to fit on a truck bed. So it opens up the opportunity as well for, prefabricated elements to be considered earlier in the process if we can fine tune the logistics. But I'll get back to the root question you had asked, which was who do we collaborate with? Understanding that we have many different disciplines within our own team, we also collaborate routinely with landscape architects, ecologists, structural engineers, architects, traditional architects as well, developers, even environmental attorneys for what can be done or what could be done for means and methods.
That's interesting because I have a master's degree in urban design, and I actually worked in a project where we tried to rehabilitate the sand because in the Philippines, a lot of the beaches,
Yep.
actually the resorts, they buy sand from
Other places, yeah. So that's something, the hydraulic modeling and the sediment and transport modeling for the sand and the fines, that's something that has to be considered in the design process.
I didn't know this is a whole business. Like all the fancy
Yeah.
resorts in the Sil Island in Mactan, all the sand is bought, and sometimes people steal sand and sell sand. It's ridiculous.
It is.
Yeah, so we worked with marine engineers and divers to really check what was underneath, so we can add this kind of concrete thing so that the sand can get redirected in one area. Is that what a waterfront architect
Yep.
does?
So I wouldn't say I mean, we have marine engineers, we have a professional engineer diver that'll go down and inspect, and we'll fly a drone to see if we don't have a diver to see what's going on below the water surface. But certainly we can look at how coastlines naturally and after catastrophes, what the differences are and what the natural transport is of if a jetty needs to be made to protect so that there's not as harsh of a wave climate, or if we need wave attenuators or a wave screen. So yeah, there are a lot of considerations as well as the navigability and the maneuvering of vessels.
Your services will really do really well in Asia, specifically in Thailand and the Philippines, when there's all that development in five-star resorts. I mean, it's just amazing. They transform the place with all this new sand, but they don't have to bring sand in. You can actually redesign the underwater structure, right?
Right.
So you can move sand around naturally. Another question, when did you launch Indigo River, and what point did you realize you wanted to go on your own? And what does Indigo River mean?
Sure. So I worked in a couple other firms, and also had a short stint outside of the industry entirely. But it was in 2018 that we launched Indigo River. And it was after I had worked at several different engineering and contracting firms, often as a prime, and observed some of the certainly government programs and incentive programs for women and minority owned business, for veteran owned businesses. And saw what kind of in some ways the competition was out there, just as far as women-owned businesses, and also understood what having an area of specialties meant for me and for our team that we've grown. And so it was 2018 that we officially launched, but I was thinking about it for a year, 18 months, kind of in advance in the back of my head. I was also working on my architecture licensure, and I had worked also in some toxic environments that I had decided I'd looked for a period of time, and I decided I didn't want to work in a toxic environment, and if I couldn't find what I was looking for in that to create it. And so that was kind of the spirit behind Indigo River, was finding what I couldn't, or creating what I couldn't find.
So why Indigo River? It's a very nice name.
Thank you. Well, it was originally intended as a kind of a temporary name, and my husband was helping me with the Department of State filing for the paperwork and getting the entity set up. And he had been asking me for a while, well, what are you going to name it? What are you going to name it? And I didn't know. And he said, well, just give me a temporary name. Look on your phone. Like, what's the last picture on your phone? And my dog, I have two dogs, but one of them is named Indigo. And the last picture on my phone was Indigo and the river. And my dog is a water dog, and she loves the river and she loves swimming. And so it was kind of in the spirit of that it was something that made me happy. It's something that makes her happy. And it has kind of a mercurial, abstract feel to it that I felt could be applied and interpreted in different ways, which I liked.
What a great story.
Thank you.
What's the most difficult part of being an entrepreneur as a woman in this male dominated profession? Like, I've never met anyone who does what you do.
So there's certainly a piece about, not being heard. And that could be taken quite literally, that sometimes when I'm in a group, and I'm the only woman at the table, I find I get a better response when I even lower the pitch of my voice. It's almost like the frequency of my natural voice doesn't even resonate, which is frustrating. But there is a part about kind of speaking up and with conviction, stating, knowing what I want to say and saying it, saying what I mean and meaning what I say. And there's a part about the delivery of making sure that it lands and that I am heard. And so that can be a challenge. And yeah, one of my go-tos is to quite literally, whether I realize it or not, I've been told that I do it, but sometimes it does mean me kind of lowering the pitch of my voice to have it land and have it resonate.
That's new. I mean, I could actually relate. If I talk to someone with a really high pitched voice, it's hard for you to get taken seriously, right? But if if you listen to news anchors, they're very
kind of monotone in their delivery. Yeah, and I don't think that I have a necessarily a high pitched voice to begin with, but for whatever reason, it's the frequency that resonates more successfully.
So I think I'll try to do that as well, because I tend to giggle a lot in my podcast. So I'll try to be more, low pitched. So how do you find your clients as, business development? Like, I mean, it seems like most of the clients that you have are or the work is all government, or how does that work?
We have a pretty healthy split, which certainly we appreciate having a diverse portfolio of both public and private clients. And the range of our projects can, be anywhere from an entire New York City municipal pier or a backyard in the suburbs that someone, needs to rebuild their seawall or wants a dock to enable recreational access to the river, to the water body. So it really changes, and our clients change, which I actually is one of the things that I appreciate is working with different clientele, because it's not always that we're working certainly with government, with municipalities, or with agencies, or with peer consultant groups and engineers. But I find talking to homeowners that know nothing about necessarily the waterfront or the infrastructure, there's a way that it kind of regrounds me, and helps me reframe what it is that I'm delivering, what it is that they're asking for, what the impact is that they're looking for. So yeah, have a range of different clients, and also the diverse portfolio certainly helps, in times of uncertainty, as we experienced during the pandemic. There was a moment of uh-oh, what's going to happen, and certainly some of our public clients did put work on hold, and not necessarily that it didn't pick up. It did pick up again, thankfully, but there were other priorities in dealing with and tending to and managing the response for the pandemic.
Wow. So for a residential client, for instance, you will have a homeowner with a lake house, for example. And then, I mean, how does that work if you're trying to get residential, or how do the residential clients find you? What's your typical scope? I just want to know.
Sure. So I live on the waterfront, in Rockland County, and through word of mouth and also through contractors that we work with, oftentimes I feel like the most exposure that the waterfront will get is when there's a contractor working on site, and that'll kind of raise the eyebrows of neighbors, and they'll see something going on, and they'll go and oftentimes approach the contractor and say, hey, I want to dock too, or I want a seawall, my wall is failing. And the contractors who we have a great relationship with, and we work with on other projects as well, will often give a couple names, and ours will be one of them. And then it's a matter of meeting with the homeowner and understanding what it is that they think that they want, and advising them on what we think they need, and kind of working through that process. And that can be, like I said, that can be a seawall, it can be a riprap, it can be soft edge, and it can be a recreational dock or a kayak launch, and into whether it's a river or a lake or whatever water body. And there's a lot of nuance with, as of right, who owns the lands underwater, and the permitting process, the joint permit application that goes to many different parties at the state and federal level, as well as, on the local municipal level. So there's a lot to navigate that I think if I hadn't, worked on the waterfront before, I would certainly try and get into it and be intimidated by just the range of different, regulatory and agencies having jurisdiction that do exist on the waterfront.
Is there a course on waterfront architecture, or how did you learn? I mean, is it by experience, or did you actually go to school to
No, I
do
mean
this?
largely experience, but there are certainly design themes that carry throughout. And I mean, licensed as an architect to protect the health, safety, and welfare in the built environment, and the waterfront often is a built environment. And so I look to assert my agency maybe in a less traditional sense, but certainly on the waterfront. And there are themes now, particularly within, climate adaptation, resiliency, sustainability, that go hand in hand with how we execute on the waterfront. And so, while I never necessarily, took a Waterfront 101 design course, experience, as well as, just general continuing education, I do a lot of continuing education that isn't actually, rated by AIA or NCARB, but it's, more for probably my engineering peers, but it applies to what I do, and I learn from it, and I enjoy it, and I'm able to kind of absorb it and put it through my own lens of, as an architect practicing on the waterfront.
So you mentioned earlier about sustainability and resiliency, and you also mentioned that these two terms are commonly or frequently misunderstood. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, I observe pretty frequently that even architects, engineers, agencies that are putting out RFPs will almost use the terms interchangeably, and while related, they're not the same thing. And usually the way that I kind of explain the difference is that they're the inverse of each other. So with sustainability, we look at humankind's impact on the natural environment. And in resiliency, we look at the natural environment's impact on the built world. So certainly they are related, and especially when you kind of zoom out in the scale of time and you consider benefit or the life cycle impacts of a project, and you assess, the full picture of what a project really is, resulting in, they are linked, but they are not the same. And oftentimes, most often, I mean, I'm very passionate about sustainability, of course, but more often in my work on the waterfront, because it is typically a vulnerable zone that's most exposed to, natural threats and hazards, I find myself looking for and designing for resiliency as a kind of a key theme. And that's under the umbrella of climate adaptation, and just how we have to be thinking not only of the client and what they're asking for here and now, but the life cycle of whatever the asset is or the infrastructure is, and future generations that will be able to use it.
That's really important. So, can you tell us about Indigo River and your different types of services that you offer?
Sure. So we are registered within New York and elsewhere. Most of our work is in New York Harbor, and we offer, I'll again classify kind of waterfront architecture, not traditional architecture, but waterfront architecture with themes of, resiliency and resiliency assessments and vulnerability assessments and cost and life benefit, or life cycle and cost benefit analyses for different projects. And then the softer side of the skills, we have the environmental permitting, the regulatory review, scheduling, sequencing, cost estimating, all centered around the waterfront. And many of our team members have certainly worked not only in the design side, but on the contractor side as well. So that, means and methods of, constructability, how will this get built, is really ingrained in everyone's head. And then on the engineering side, we have the marine engineering and the coastal engineering. So structures on the waterfront, again, that could be a bulkhead, that could be a marina, it could be a port facility, it could be a ferry landing. And the two really go hand in hand, because we've seen where, the architect will design what the architect wants to see, and the engineer will get it and kind of redesign it based on the engineering standards. And when the two aren't overlaid, or there isn't that collaboration internally, there can be, bits and pieces that get lost. So we enjoy having that collaboration internally, and certainly extending and pulling in, peripheral team members, whether it's a ecologist or a landscape architect or whoever that we need to round out our team.
That's great. So, just out of curiosity, what type of software do you use for like waterfront architecture? Is there a particular one that is specific to the trade?
No, I mean, we have an array of different softwares that we use depending on the application, but certainly we use CAD, we use Revit, we use Rhino, we use Orca for floating structures. So it really depends on the application. We're not doing so much, sediment transport modeling in-house. We usually will bring someone in for that, but there are, an array of other softwares that are intended specifically for that.
Yeah, I know nowadays there's a software for everything, right?
Can't keep up with them all.
Yeah. So what are your exciting projects in the pipeline?
So we have we have some traditional projects that we're on call for Governor's Island, which is very exciting. We have, Battery Park City, where we're on site for the construction manager. Eastside Coastal Resiliency, again, a lot of resiliency themed work, and we help with the staging on the, resiliency aspects for, what comes and goes by water. Harlem River Greenway, rebuilding the entire north area of Manhattan on the waterfront. So there were old structures that have kind of gone derelict in different ways, and so we are assisting the design team, who's laying in engineers, on the permitting and the environmental impacts for the different improvements that are proposed. And we have a handful of New York State parks projects upstate that vary in, what is being done, but it's really nice to be able to go to work and be on the water or be in the state park. It's certainly a nice area. And then something that we're doing that's newer and kind of exciting in a different way, is not something that we've done before, and it's our role within the offshore wind emerging industry in New York. And we are working with the New York City Economic Development Corporation on a mentorship program, particularly for women and minority-owned businesses, and how they'll be in the pipeline and be working on offshore wind projects. So that's certainly something that's exciting. And within that, we have a training school that we've franchised and are looking to launch to help with the workforce development within the New York metro area.
So we, meaning Indigo River, has a training school?
Indigo River is part of a joint venture that has launched a training school, yes.
Wow. I feel like we need another podcast just for that.
Certainly.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So there are some ambitious and rightfully so goals and targets that have been set both by the federal and by state entities for offshore wind and renewable energy. And for those to be met, there's frankly there's a gap in the workforce right now. And even if we were to look to take labor from abroad, whether Europe or elsewhere, that maybe has the skilled labor, frankly there's not enough. So there's really a need for an expertise to be developed within offshore wind, both for the construction as well as for the waterfront, for the construction, the pipeline of the waterfront services that are kind of ancillary to the offshore industry. So that's something that's emerging and kind of we've identified it because we're in the middle of it. We see that interface of what's coming and what we have or what we don't have, and so helping to build the pipeline and really focusing on amplifying and getting women and minority businesses into that queue early on.
So that's a very strategic move as well as for a business owner.
Mm-hmm.
In my business, we do architecture, drafting, and support.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also tapping the schools in the Philippines and trying to train them at the university level so that when they're out of college, they're hireable, because there's a shortage of staff all over.
Yep.
So that's great that you have your own school that you can you're building the pipeline so they can work with you in the future or whoever. What are your hobbies, or do you have time for hobbies?
No, so I mean, hobbies are so important to just change headspace. I certainly during the pandemic took up yoga. I had done it before. I had a shoulder injury, and I for a period of time couldn't or wasn't safe to even go to the physical therapist, and so I was looking for ways at home to heal, and yoga became one of them. And so I've gotten more and more into yoga. I mean, outside of the pandemic, I love to travel and enjoy traveling. I feel like seeing new culture just kind of stretches the creative muscles to, not take things for granted or the way that, we grew up to see them. It's so nice to see different cultures doing different things and learn from it. I do live on the Hudson and I do love to paddleboard. So that's kind of my connection with the water. If I can get up early and go for a sunrise paddle, I absolutely will. And I am a Peloton fan, so I love cycling. Really appreciated that. Particularly, my husband got my Peloton for me before the pandemic, and just in time, because I feel like there was then a rush to get them, and they were kind of back ordered for a while. But certainly appreciated throughout the pandemic having a sense of community just from through exercise as an outlet.
Oh, I love Peloton. I have like two favorite instructors, Robin Arzon and
Love
the
her.
other, and the girl with the curly hair who just got married.
Allie?
Yeah, I
Allie
know their
Love?
life story. Ali Love, because I've been following them since like maybe 15 years already.
Yeah, they're great.
Robin was an attorney and then she moved to a different
I
career.
love
Like
it. Love that. Yeah, she successful in her own right and just pivoted and went into something completely different and able to apply her
people are
lessons
like,
learned.
they're like, how do you even know about them? I'm like, well, I follow them. Like, Ali just got married.
Yeah,
Robin had a
inspirational
baby.
figures. Got to appreciate your social media family, the extension, the community.
Exactly, and it's very inspiring, especially for people who've invested so much time in law, and then they
Yep,
become exercise gurus, and now kind of like celebrity levels, right?
absolutely.
So, what is your advice for aspiring entrepreneurs who are not ready to take the leap but are thinking about it?
Listen to your gut. You have, I'm sure, if you're thinking about it, start lining up, actionable steps, and not that you should be scared to take the leap, but as much as you can do, kind of on your own on the side before you fully launch, the better off you'll be. But listen to your intuition, and if it's reminding you and persistent and directing you toward a certain path, it's probably for a reason.
That's true. I never heard that before. Listen to your gut, but that it's absolutely right. And a lot of people, burn out and they just, I think that's what they do to become really successful. So what's next for Dina, and where do you see yourself in 3 years?
Oh, what's next for me? Well, probably a vacation, to be honest. Been a while as we bogged down during the pandemic and didn't travel for a while, and now travel has picked up for conferences and things, but not necessarily for personal. So my husband and I are looking forward to taking our first vacation just for us in a very long time, far too long. Um, and in 3 years, where are we in 3 years? 2025. So we'll be in the thick of offshore wind. So I'd love to see, a couple classes having graduated out in the workforce and knowing that, we played a part in their career and their trajectory and within, the goals for renewable energy at large.
Thank you. So where can we find you online?
So online, we have our website, which is indigoriver.com, certainly through there or through LinkedIn, just under my name, Dena Prastos. And on Instagram, I'm fairly active. Just, again, my name, Dena Prastos.
Thank you so much, Dena. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Me too. Thank you for having me, Aya.
That was Dena Prastos of Indigo River. Thanks for listening to this episode of Architect My Life, a podcast brought to you by the MGS Global Group. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you would like to add to the conversation through your own experiences, I encourage you to be a guest on one of our upcoming episodes. Visit architectmylife.com/apply to learn how. I firmly believe that a strong community drives change and fosters success. If you'd like to be part of this community, join the All-Female Architect My Life Facebook group. Please take a moment to review us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. We'd love to hear from you. Be sure to follow me on Instagram at aya_architectmylife and Architect My Life Podcast. Thanks again for listening. I'm Aya Shlachter. Until next time.